Okay, let's go ahead and get started with chapter 6. We're going to start looking at the cell. And this is all part of just at the bottom of the levels of organization and just a level above molecules. So far, we have been focusing on all things about molecules, right? So learning about atoms and elements and bonds and these macromolecules that we have talked about so far. Well, now finally, we're going to start talking about the basic unit of life, which is the cell right here. Okay. And in this particular chapter, we're going to start exploring different parts of the cells. Okay. Those little parts are called organelles. So let's go ahead and dig in and see what we're dealing with here. Okay. First of all, we need to know that there are two different types of cells. One of them is called prokaryotic. The other one is called eukaryotic. Okay. So what this means is that some cells are going to have a nucleus and others will not. This is how it works. I'm going to break down these words for you. Okay. Let me get my pen here. So this part over here, karyo, is referring to nucleus. Like that. Okay. And in here, pro is referring to before. Okay. Oops, I almost forgot to do the E. Before. So prokaryotic means before nucleus. That means that these cells do not have a nucleus. These ones over here, eukaryotic, well, as you can imagine, the karyo part, it's still referring to nucleus. Okay. The U part refers to true nucleus. That is what eukaryotic means. So the single most defining characteristic is the presence or absence of a nucleus. There are many other differences, but that is what the name stands for. That is what we mainly look for in these cells, okay? In these diagrams that we see here, this cell has a nucleus. Okay, this will be the nucleus right here. So this is the eukaryotic cell. This one does not have a nucleus. Okay, instead the DNA is just concentrated, but there is no membrane. Okay, there's no membrane surrounding that DNA. So this would be a prokaryotic cell. Okay, because it's before nucleus. There's no nucleus, no real one anyway. Okay. So those two major types of cells define the domains of life. Okay. I don't know if you remember from chapter 1, we took a brief look at the domains of life and we talked about there being 3 of them. So we have bacteria, archaea. These are 2 of the domains of life. And every single organism in these domains are prokaryotic. Okay. Meaning that they are made up of cells that do not have nuclei. Okay, which by the way, nuclei, that is the plural for nucleus. So nucleus is the singular. Okay, nuclei, that is plural. Okay, and then we have the third domain, aptly named eukarya, meaning that every single cell that is part of this domain has a nucleus. Okay, and that is, of course, where we are. This is where we are including animals and fungi and plants, okay? And then a lot of these other things are single-celled eukaryotics, eukaryotic organisms, meaning that they are full organisms that are only made up of one cell. But what matters is that that one cell does have a nucleus. So, oops, here. Okay. Prokaryotes, again, these fellas do not have a nucleus. As you can see, there's this region here in the middle. Okay, let me switch to a laser if I can. Here we go. There's this region right here in the middle. Okay, that is where the DNA is being concentrated. A lot of these guys are unicellular. Okay, meaning that they are just one cell. That one cell is a fully functioning organism, a fully functioning independent organism. Okay, that is what unicellular means. Uni meaning for one, cellular, well, cell. Again, no nucleus. Everything is basically concentrated in this region here. That region is called the nucleoid. You need to know that, the nucleoid. Okay. Also, there are no other compartments. There are no organelles or other specialized areas in the cell. Basically, everything is mixed together, okay, in this one big, big space. That big space, by the way, is called the cytoplasm, okay? It is basically that whole space inside the cell, okay? It is surrounded by a plasma membrane, okay? And everything inside is called the cytoplasm, or that whole space. And the space is filled with a specific fluid called cytosol, okay? It's an aqueous fluid, meaning that it is water-based, okay? It's called a cytosol. So again, the cytosol, that's what it's filling the cytoplasm. Eukaryotes, they have a bit more stuff inside, as you can imagine. First of all, of course, they have a nucleus, okay? So this whole thing over here is one of the larger organelles that you're gonna see in a eukaryote. That's the nucleus. And it is delimited by a plasma membrane, or a membrane. I'm gonna call it just a nuclear membrane at this point. Inside the nucleus, there's also this little thing over here. This is called a nucleolus. We'll be examining this in more detail in a moment, okay, or in a separate video, I will say. And then the whole cell is surrounded by a plasma membrane, okay? And the whole space inside, all of the other space inside, is also called a cytoplasm, okay? Here it is, the word again, cytoplasm. And just like in prokaryotes, it is also filled with cytosol, okay? Now, one thing I forgot to mention, every time you hear this, cyto, that refers to cell, okay? Cyto refers to cell. So when you see cytosol, I want you to think about the cell solution, okay? The solution that is inside the cell, okay? Like what basically fills up the cell in that space, okay? Now, also notice, let me switch back to my laser here. Also notice how there are all of these little compartments, these little very well-defined structures, okay, in this cell. These are known as organelles, okay? And I'll talk about organelles in a moment. But because of all of these specialized functions within these cells, they tend to be quite a bit larger than prokaryotic cells, which are a lot simpler. Organelles, what does that mean? So organelles are just basically those small compartments inside the cell. So while we may think of a cell as being the basic component or compartment of life, within cells, there are even smaller compartments. And when you think about this word, organelle, think about organs, okay? Like the organs in your body. There are, specific organs that have specific functions, and that is what keeps you going, right? Well, it is the same thing, what is happening right here in the cell. Okay, the cells have little organs that we're just going to call organelles. Think about them as little organs. And they have specialized functions that help the cell, well, survive. Okay. Each one is separated by membranes, specifically phospholipid bilayers. Most, if not all, of these membranes that are separating and compartmentalizing the cell are phospholipid bilayers. Do you guys remember that from when we were looking at phospholipids? So phospholipids, remember, they have a hydrophilic head and two fatty acid tails that are hydrophobic, okay? So when you put a bunch of phospholipids in water, okay, this is basically what they do. They're going to form a bilayer. Hopefully you remember that, because this was actually part of the review that we've talked about. Very important concept to understand. And we'll learn a lot more about that when we get to the membrane chapter. But basically what happens is that there's going to be water on this side and water on this side. And the phospholipid heads are going to interact with the water because, well, they are hydrophilic. They like being there. Whereas these tails here are going to stay away from the water. So that is basically what these layers look like, okay? Just a lot more of them and just a lot longer, obviously. But that is what we mean by the bilayer, because here's one layer, that's one, two layers, okay? Remember, bi in this case is going to stand for two, okay? And it's two layers of phospholipids, okay? Each one of these organelles are going to have specialized functions, and this is what allows for a lot of processes to occur at the same time without interfering with one another, okay? Now, plants and animal cells tend to have most of the same organelles, but there are some key differences. And we'll go ahead and start pointing those out as we explore the organelles. In the next video, we're going to start exploring what those organelles are. So I will see you guys on the next one.